We said before that one of Murphy's laws was before you do anything, you have to do something else first. And before you achieve maximum productivity, you have to eliminate the time wasters in your life. The time wasters surround you on all sides and tear away at your minutes and hours and hold you back from producing the critical results that are vital to the success in your career. We've been talking, by the way, about eliminating time wasters from the very beginning. In a way, we've told you about two laws. One is called the law of the excluded alternative, which says that whenever you do one thing, you cannot simultaneously do another. So if you start to work on something that's more important to you, you cannot work on things that are less important. There's another law. It's called the law of forced efficiency. And again, it says when you have a burning desire to produce or perform in a particular area, and you focus all of your time, attention, and energy in that area, that alone will cause you to avoid and ignore and get away from the critical time wasters. So what we started with were the starting points of great success. And the first is clarity. 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 What are you trying to do? How are you trying to do it? What are you trying to do? How are you trying to do it? Clarity is the number one word in time management, and it runs through everything you do. And it leads us to not only clarity with regard to goals and objectives, but it leads us to clarity with regard to priorities. The 80-20 rule. What are the 20% of the things that you do that account for 80% of your results? And the more you can focus single-mindedly on those, the more likely it is that you're going to be able to avoid the time wasters. Now, the second key to avoiding time wasters is decision. Decision with regard to the areas of concentration. What are the one or two things that you're going to do that make all the difference? You see, you can never do everything there is to do, so you have to think, and you can only do the one or two things that make all the difference in the world. And that's decision with regard to concentration. And the more clear your decisions and the more you concentrate, the easier it is for you to eliminate time wasters. Point number 3 is that you and I and everybody are surrounded by time wasters. In fact, most people are time wasters. Most people, by their very nature, because they're not as focused as you and I are, have a tendency to waste time. They socialize, they talk, they drink coffee, they drop in. They phone us on the telephone. They have recurring crises. They have problems. They have an excess of meetings and a whole lot of other things. So remember that most people waste time. Your job is to break away from others and be known to the critical people in your business as the person who doesn't waste time. Here's one of the great rules, is when you work, work all the time you work. Work all the time you work. Work all the time you work. This is one of the great rules of life. From the time that you come in, remember, your job is not to read papers, make phone calls, socialize, drop off your laundry, pick up your groceries, or get your dry cleaning done. Your job is to work all the time you work. If you're going to work 8 hours, by gum, you work 8 solid hours and just work, work, work. And I promise you this, everybody that counts knows who the workers are, and everybody knows who the non-workers are. All right, looking at all the studies, we have found that there are several major time wasters in the world of work. And let's take them one at a time. From the most relevant, we'll talk about the basic 7. The first of the major time wasters is the telephone. The telephone seems to have an insistence with its ringing that causes us to be distracted over and over again. So here are some keys with regard to using the telephone. I'll just give them to you quickly. Key number 1 is have your calls held. Rather than responding to the telephone every time it rings, have your calls held. A second thing is to have your calls screened. If it is not important for you to talk to that person or there's no value to it, don't take the phone call. Don't allow your curiosity to overwhelm you. Number 3 is look upon the telephone as a business tool, not a social tool. You and I are conditioned from infancy, and especially from our teenage years, to think of the telephone as a social tool. We think that's how we communicate with our friends. The fact is that when you get into the business world, it's a business tool, which means get on and off it fast. Make it a business tool. When somebody phones, say, hello, how are you? And if they go into a conversation, say, what can I do for you? How can I help you? And get the conversation straight down to business as fast as possible. Now, here's another thing. When you're phoning somebody else, always have an agenda. Take a couple of seconds to write out what you're going to talk to the person about. And when you call them up, say, I'd like to talk to you about 3 things. And tell them what the agenda is. And when you discuss the 3 things, keep notes. We say the power is on the side of the person with the best notes. So keep notes on the conversation, and when you're finished with them, say, I know you're busy, I'll let you go. When a person is really conversational, likes to talk a lot, say, well, I certainly have enjoyed talking to you, and I know you're busy, so I'll let you go. Nobody's going to say, no, I'm not busy. So therefore, get on and off quickly. And finally, number 5 is batch your calls. So once you have collected all of these calls, return all your calls at the same time. There are very few calls that are so important that you can't put them off till later. Now, the second key source of interruptions is visitors. We'll put the number 4 up here. Number 5 is visitors. Drop-in visitors, people who visit you either inside or outside the company without warning, and there are ways to take care of the visitors. Number 1 way to take care of the visitors, when somebody drops in and says, have you got a minute? What you say is no. And what you do say is very simply this, is say, no, I'm really busy right now. Could I talk to you a little bit later? Just be really polite, but pull the plug on a drop-in visitor as quickly as you possibly can. When somebody comes into your office, here's a quick key. Stand up. If you stand up, it's very hard for another person to sit down. It's almost impossible, in fact. So you stand up and you say, I'm really under the gun right now. I'm trying to finish a couple of things, and could I talk to you a little bit later? What will happen is the person will stand up for a couple of minutes. They'll be a little bit uncomfortable, and then they'll leave. Now, a second thing that people do is that they put a do not disturb sign on their office handle. They get one from a hotel the next time they're in a hotel, and they put it on the outside so they can get themselves an hour or 2 hours of quiet time during the day. A third thing that you can do is when a visitor comes in is walk the visitor to the door. Say, well, one more thing before you go. And get up and take the visitor and walk them to the door. Something that people often do, by the way, is they say, hey, have I shown you something? And they say, something I wanted to show you. And you get up and you take them by the arm, and you take them outside of your office to show them something, and you say, I know you're busy. I'll let you get back to work. I'm in a hurry, too, and get back to work. So dealing with the drop-in visitor is absolutely essential. Standing up is one of the great keys. If you stand up quickly when somebody comes in, they're unlikely to stay there for very long. The 6th major source of interruptions is meetings. Now, here's a couple of points with regard to meetings. First of all, meetings are absolutely essential in business. They are a business tool. They're an absolutely essential way of sharing information, solving problems, doing joint problem solving, and so on. Also team building. However, an excess of meetings indicates malorganization. What does that mean? It means that nobody is really sure what they're supposed to be doing, and there's probably too many people. So meetings are a great waste of time. The average person spends about 3 to 5 years of their life in meetings, and about 50 to 70% of that time is wasted. So how do you cut down on the amount of time that you waste in meetings? Here's the keys that have been discovered over and over again. First of all, don't go. If you can possibly get out of a meeting, don't go to it. Say, is it necessary for me to be at this meeting? Now, if you're holding a meeting, here's a critical point. Take the number of people who will be attending, multiply their hourly wage by the number of people to work out the cost of that meeting. If you have 10 people who are earning $25 an hour each, you have a meeting that costs $250 an hour. If somebody came to you and said, could I spend $250, what would you say? You'd say, wait a minute, what's the reason for this meeting? What's the purpose? Why are we going to spend $250? And you need to know the purpose of every meeting. So therefore, once you've determined the purpose of the meeting, be sure that you have an agenda. If you are not organizing the meeting, make sure that somebody else who is organizing has an agenda. The 4th thing that you can do to make meetings more effective is to have start and stop time and stay on schedule. If the meeting is supposed to go from 8:30 to 9:30, make sure it goes from 8:30 to 9:30. Assume the latecomer is not coming. Don't wait for anybody. Just plunge right into the meeting. F is start with the most important items first on the agenda. Start with the most important items and deal with them first, so that if the meeting runs out of time, you've at least covered the major things. G is leave as soon as possible. Ask if your item can be discussed, or the thing that's of relevance to you can be discussed, and then when it's over, leave as quickly as possible. And finally, the last is, if you're going to have a meeting, distribute minutes after the meeting so that everybody knows what happens. Distribute minutes, and especially get closure on every item before you go on to additional items. Then distribute minutes so that everybody knows what was decided. These are the keys to making meetings effective. The 7th major time waster in the world of work is firefighting. Now, why does firefighting arise? Well, firefighting arises in one case naturally. You can't avoid it. Unexpected crises occur. However, the best way to deal with a crisis is to anticipate it. Now here's the rule. If the same crisis arises more than once, the reason that has happened is because nobody has thought about how to put into place a policy that deals with it. So the first thing in dealing with a crisis, A, is to stop and think. Before you react, stop and think. Get the facts. Get the facts. Ask questions. What exactly happened? When did it happen? Where did it happen? How did it happen? Get the real facts, not the assumed facts or the apparent facts or the obvious facts, but get the real facts. Get the facts, and the more slowly you go toward thinking through the crisis, the more likely it is that your response to it will be effective. C is delegate wherever possible. If you can delegate resolving the crisis to someone else, by all means do so. Big mistake. If you come up through the ranks, and one of the things you do is you come up as you deal with this type of problem, when you rise to higher positions, you'll have a tendency to fall back into your comfort zone and go back and try to deal with the problem. So firefighting is a natural tendency for us because it's comfort, so delegate. And finally, the last key to delegation is decisiveness. Whatever you do, make a decision. Make a decision and then get on with it. Which brings us to the 8th reason for time wastage in organizations, and it's socializing. And as we said before, the average person spends as much as 30% of their time socializing. The fact is that socializing is a great waste of time, so what you simply ask is this what I've been hired to do? Not only is this what I've been hired to do, would I pay someone else to do what I'm doing? And remember, work all the time you work. Treat the working environment like a business environment and get away from socializing. Save your socializing for after-work activities. Number 9 is indecision. Indecision is almost invariably caused by either ignorance or fear. And one of the things we know about this indecision is that 80% of all decisions should be made now. One question you always have to ask yourself is this a decision that has to be made by me? And if it's not, delegate the decision. If possible, make the decision quickly. And we say that successful people are not necessarily those who make the right decisions, but they make their decisions right. In any case, indecision drags out time more than you can possibly imagine. Number 10 has to do with knowledge workers. The fact of the matter is, today, most of our employees are knowledge workers. Knowledge workers are people whose work is characterized by producing results. They produce results. And it takes a lot of time and a lot of unbroken time to converse with knowledge workers, to help them articulate, to help them think, to dialogue, and so on. So you cannot rush dealing with knowledge workers. Critical point. Number 11, you have to ask yourself, whose time do you waste? Whose time do you waste? Because you are also a time waster for other people. Do you keep people waiting? Do you keep people delayed? Do you come late for meetings? Do you promise things and then not do it? So ask other people, how do I waste your time, and to do everything possible to eliminate it. The 12th form of time wasting is perfectionism, is trying too hard to do the job too well the first time. So ask yourself, how well does a job have to be done? And if you can do it that well, then don't worry about getting it right. Internal memos, things for internal distribution, don't have to be done perfectly every time. Number 13, major time waster, is television. Now, the average adult in America wastes 25% of their time, their discretionary time, watching television. The average adult in America could become rich if all they did was not waste their time on television. Now, the way that you deal with television is to first of all understand that excessive television watching, now not watching a learning program like this on video, but excessive television watching is very hurtful. It causes you to become passive. It turns your mind to porridge. It causes you to become apathetic. It causes you to lose your capacity to think critically. And what it does is it causes you to lose your aggressiveness. So here's the key to television. Cut down by 1/2 hour per week. Chief executive officers of Fortune 500 corporations watch less than 5 hours of television per week. And there's a direct correlation between the number of hours of television you watch and how far down you go on the wage scale. The people who watch the least amount of television and spend the most amount of time reading, learning, communicating, growing, working at their work are the ones who are the most successful. And finally, number 14 is non-goal-oriented activity. The key to eliminating the time wasters and the interrupters is very simple, is do not do anything that does not move you toward the accomplishment of goals that are important to you. Every single time an activity comes up, you have to ask yourself, is this moving me in the direction that I want to go? Is this helping me achieve a goal that's important to me? And if it's not, just say no.